Picture this. A Messenian farmer named Polychares stands at the edge of his barley field watching his son die. The boy is 14 years old. His name is Euephanus, and 3 hours ago he was chasing a stray heifer across the border stones that separate Messenian soil from Laconian dirt. The heifer belonged to a Spartan named Euephanos, a man whose name, by cruel coincidence, sounds almost identical to the boy now choking on his own blood. The Spartan had accused the Messenian boy of theft. The boy had protested. Words became shoves. Shoves became fists. And then the Spartans' companions arrived, 5 young men from the Agoge, the brutal training program that turns Laconian children into instruments of murder. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wait for explanations. They saw a Messenian touching a Spartan, and they responded the only way they knew how. Polychares doesn't scream. He stands 50 yards away, close enough to see, but too far to intervene, and he watches. He counts. He counts every blow, 17 strikes with oak cudgels, each one landing with the wet thud of wood against meat and bone. Sas mine. He memorizes each face, the tall one with the broken nose, the short one with the scar above his left eye, the one who laughs between strikes, who seems to find genuine pleasure in the mechanics of violence. Polychares burns these faces into his memory the way a smith burns patterns into bronze. He will need them later. Euephanus stops moving after the 11th blow. The remaining 6 are delivered to a corpse, but the Spartans don't seem to notice or care. They're practicing. Each strike is an exercise in technique, the proper rotation of the hips, the snap of the wrists at the moment of impact, the follow-through that maximizes force transfer. They've been taught that hesitation is weakness and mercy is treason. They've been taught that non-Spartans are not quite human. The boy on the ground is simply training material, no different from the straw dummies they beat in the gymnasium. When they finally stop, panting and splattered with blood that isn't theirs, they don't even look at Polychares. They collect their heifer, the animal that started everything, now lowing nervously at the smell of death, and they walk back across the border into Laconia. One of them, the laughing one, pauses to urinate on the body. It's not personal. It's just what you do. It's what they've always done. Polychares waits until they're gone. Then he walks to his son's body and kneels in the blood-soaked dirt. The boy's skull is misshapen, caved in on the left side where the blows concentrated. His jaw hangs loose, broken in at least 2 places. His eyes are open, staring at nothing, already filming over with the gray haze of death. Polychares closes them with trembling fingers. He tries to speak, to say his son's name, to offer a prayer, to scream his rage at the uncaring sky, but nothing comes out. His throat is closed. His voice has abandoned him. He carries the body home. His wife sees him coming from a distance, sees the shape in his arms, sees the way his shoulders shake, and she begins to wail before he reaches the door. The sound cuts through the evening air like a blade, a primal shriek that carries across the fields and into the neighboring farms. Other women take up the cry, a chorus of grief that rises and falls like waves against stone. But Polychares remains silent. He lays his son on the family altar, the same stone where he once made offerings for the boy's safe birth. He washes the blood from the broken face. He straightens the shattered limbs. And then he sits beside the body and waits for the sun to set. That night, Polychares crosses the border into Laconia. He doesn't bring a weapon. He doesn't need one. He finds a farmhouse 2 miles inside Spartan territory, a small holding not unlike his own where a family sleeps peacefully under the assumption that the world is just. The door is unlocked. Why would it be otherwise? This is Laconia, the heartland of the warrior race. No one attacks Spartans in their beds. No one would dare. Polychares takes a bronze cooking knife from the hearth. The blade is worn from years of use, its edge dulled by the cutting of bread and meat and vegetables. It will serve. He moves through the house with the methodical patience of a man who has already died inside. The farmer dies first, a hand over the mouth, the blade across the throat, the wet gurgle of a scream that never reaches air. The wife dies second, waking just long enough to see her husband's blood pooling across the floor before she joins him. The children die last. There are 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, the eldest perhaps 10 years old. They don't understand what's happening. They don't have time to understand. Polychares leaves 1 child alive. The youngest, a boy of 5 or 6, small enough to have hidden under the bed when the killing started. Polychares drags the boy out by his ankle and forces him to look at the bodies. He forces the boy to memorize every detail, the way his mother's hand still reaches toward the door, the way his father's eyes stare at the ceiling, the way his siblings lie tangled together as if trying to protect each other in death. Then Polychares speaks the first words he's uttered since watching his son die. "Tell your kings that Messenia remembers." He releases the boy and walks out into the night. He doesn't run. He doesn't hide. He walks home, washes his hands in the same basin where he washed his son's blood, and goes to sleep beside his wife. In the morning, he rises before dawn and begins plowing his field. There is work to do. The barley won't plant itself. The Spartans find the farmhouse 3 days later. The boy has been wandering the countryside, mute with shock, unable to articulate what he witnessed. When he finally speaks, his words come out in fragments. A man, a knife, bodies, blood, Messenia. The message is clear enough. The Spartans send a delegation to the Messenian king demanding justice. They want Polychares delivered in chains. They want compensation for the destroyed property. Not the family, of course, but the farm itself, the tools, the livestock that wandered off during the 3 days the house stood empty. Human life doesn't factor into the calculation. The Messenian king refuses. His counselors argue that Polychares acted in response to an unprovoked murder, that the Spartans struck first, that justice belongs to both sides or neither. The Spartan delegation doesn't debate. They don't negotiate. They simply nod, turn around, and walk out. 2 months later, the Spartan army crosses the border. This isn't the start of a war. This is the start of an extermination. The First Messenian War doesn't begin with armies clashing on open fields or generals exchanging formal declarations. It begins with a father's grief, a child's terror, and the absolute certainty on both sides that mercy is no longer possible. The stakes aren't about honor or glory or the favor of the gods. The stakes are simpler and more brutal than any epic poet would admit. The most fertile land in the Peloponnese, the breadbasket that will determine which people eat and which people starve, which children grow to adulthood and which ones become bones in unmarked graves. Polychares dies in the first month of the war, killed during a Spartan raid on his village. His wife is taken as a slave, his farm is burned, his name is erased from every Messenian record, deemed too dangerous to remember, too inflammatory to teach to children who might grow up seeking revenge of their own. But erasure doesn't equal forgetting. The Messenians remember Polychares in whispers, in secret songs passed from mother to daughter, in the stories told after dark when the Spartan overseers have gone to bed. They remember the man who refused to scream, who counted every blow, who paid back blood with blood. The war will last 20 years. It will kill a generation. It will end not with victory, but with chains, with the transformation of an entire people into property, with the birth of a slave system so brutal that it will horrify even the ancient world. But it starts here, in this moment, with a father kneeling in his son's blood and making a choice that will echo for 7 generations. The Greeks called it the First Messenian War. They should have called it what it was, the beginning of the century of chains. Now, let's be clear about something that the myths don't mention and the poets refuse to admit. Sparta in 750 BC is not the military superpower of legend. It's not the iron fortress of later imagination, the city without walls because its men are walls enough. It's a collection of 5 unwalled villages clinging to the rocky slopes of the Eurotas River Valley, populated by farmers who happen to fight and fighters who occasionally farm. The soil is thin and mean, scraped clean by centuries of erosion, studded with limestone that breaks plowshares and ruins backs. The harvests are unpredictable, good years barely adequate, bad years catastrophic. The infant mortality rate hovers somewhere around 40%, meaning 4 out of every 10 Spartan babies born will die before they learn to walk. The survivors aren't much luckier. A Spartan boy who makes it past infancy faces childhood diseases, training accidents, and the systematic brutality of the Agoge, the military education system that treats children like raw material to be hammered into weapons. Boys are starved deliberately, taught to steal food from adult tables, beaten when they're caught. The logic is simple. A soldier who can't endure hunger is useless. A soldier who can't steal undetected is a liability. The ones who survive this regimen emerge hard, lean, and permanently damaged in ways that don't show on the outside. The ones who don't survive are buried in unmarked graves, their names forgotten, their potential erased. Now consider the mathematics of feeding this society. A medimnos is roughly 12 gallons of grain, so we're talking about nearly 1,000 gallons of barley annually, just to keep one man on his feet and combat ready. That grain must be converted into bread, porridge, and the infamous black broth. a soup of pork blood, vinegar, and salt that supposedly tastes like liquefied despair. The broth is so unappetizing that a visitor from Sybaris, a city famous for luxury, once tried it and said, "Now I understand why Spartans don't fear death." He wasn't joking. The Eurotas Valley, even in good years, produces enough grain for perhaps 3,000 citizens. Sparta has 8,000 men of military age. The math doesn't work. Someone has to starve or someone has to steal. For generations, the Spartans have managed this gap through a combination of ruthless efficiency and targeted raiding. They take what they need from their weaker neighbors. They accept the occasional famine as the price of independence. They bury their children and try again. But there's a limit to how much a society can absorb. By the middle of the 8th century, Sparta is pressing against that limit. The population has grown faster than the food supply. The raids that once sufficed are no longer enough. The Spartans look out from their rocky valley at the world around them, and they see exactly one solution: Messenia. Messenia is everything Sparta isn't. Where the Eurotas Valley is stony and grudging, the Messenian plain is deep black earth that crumbles sweetly between the fingers. Where Spartan orchards produce wizened olives barely worth pressing, Messenian groves hang heavy with fruit so fat it splits its own skin. Where Spartan cattle are rangy and tough, Messenian herds are sleek and well-fed, their meat marbled with fat, their hides thick, enough for the finest leather. A Spartan farmer standing on the border between the two lands can see the difference stretching out to the horizon. On one side, gray rock and yellow stubble. On the other, a carpet of green that never seems to end. The contrast is almost obscene. Messenian farmers complain about abundance, too much wheat, more olives than they can press, calves being born faster than they can be counted. Their granaries overflow. Their children grow tall and strong. Their women have the sleek roundness that comes from never knowing hunger. They build temples and celebrate festivals and commission poets to sing about their good fortune, and every word of their prosperity carries across the border to the Spartans who crouch in their mean little villages, chewing their blood soup and watching their children die. The Spartans don't want Messenian culture. They don't care about Messenian poetry or Messenian gods or Messenian architecture. They don't want to learn from the Messenians or trade with them or intermarry into their families. They want Messenian calories. They want the grain that will keep their soldiers alive and the meat that will put muscle on their boys and the oil that will light their lamps through the long winter nights. The entire war, stripped of its heroic pretensions and divine justifications, is a grocery run with spears. This is the part the myths leave out. The Spartans don't invade Messenia because they're warriors born with conquest in their blood. They invade because they're hungry. They invade because their children are dying. They invade because the arithmetic of survival has only one answer, and that answer requires taking what belongs to someone else. The Spartan kings understand this calculation even if they don't speak it aloud. War requires investment: a hoplite panoply, the bronze shield, the bronze helmet, the bronze greaves, the bronze breastplate, the ashwood spear, the iron-edged sword costs more than most Spartan families will earn in a decade. The metal alone weighs 30 kilograms per soldier, and metal doesn't grow on trees. Bronze requires copper and tin. Copper comes from Cyprus, hundreds of miles across the sea. Tin comes from the edge of the known world, Britain or Afghanistan, depending on which trade routes are open. The supply chain for a single Spartan warrior stretches 4,000 miles across mountains, deserts, and oceans. To field an army of 5,000 hoplites, the minimum needed for a serious invasion, Sparta requires 100 te, 50 tons of bronze. They don't have it. The treasury houses contain pitiful amounts, some gold dedications from wealthy families, some silver bowls from long-forgotten victories, some copper ingots traded from Phoenician merchants. It's not enough. It's not remotely enough. The E4s, the elected officials who manage Spartan finances, stare at the empty chests and understand the truth. This war will require sacrifice beyond anything they've attempted before. So they begin melting. Religious offerings become helmet facings. Ancestral swords become spear points. The bronze tripods that wealthy families have dedicated to the gods over generations, sacred objects, irreplaceable, heavy with spiritual significance, are hauled out of temples and thrown into furnaces. The priests protest. The E4s don't care. Bronze is bronze. The gods will understand or they won't, but either way the army will march with proper equipment. The human cost is harder to calculate but equally brutal. Every shield forged means food not bought. Every helmet hammered means a family that will eat less this winter. The Spartans are choosing weapons over their own children, betting everything on a single campaign, gambling that the conquest of Messenia will pay back the investment 100-fold. If they win, their children will grow fat on Messenian grain. If they lose, there won't be enough Spartans left to worry about it. This is the Sparta that marches toward Messenia in the year we now call 743 BC. Not a superpower, but a desperate society of hungry men with borrowed weapons and borrowed time. They're not heroes seeking glory. They're farmers seeking food. They're fathers hoping their sons won't starve. They're a people who have run out of options and chosen the only path that remains. The Messenians see them coming. They see the dust rising from the mountain passes, the glint of bronze in the morning light, the column of red cloaks snaking down from the northern hills. They see an army that looks from a distance invincible, a wall of shields moving with mechanical precision, a machine designed for one purpose. They don't see the hollowed cheeks behind the helmets. They're terrified, not of the Messenians, but of the alternative. They're marching because the math says they have no choice. They're fighting because starvation is worse than death. They're conquering because the only other option is watching their civilization collapse into the rocky soil of a valley that was never meant to sustain them. The century of chains begins not with heroism, but with hunger. Remember that. When the poets sing of Spartan valor and Messenian resistance, remember what this war was really about. 82 medimnoi of barley, the caloric requirements of a single soldier, the simple arithmetic of survival multiplied by 8,000 hungry mouths. The Spartans aren't invading Messenia to prove their superiority. They're invading because they're starving. And starving men will do things that well-fed men cannot imagine. Before Sparta can invade, it needs divine permission. War without the gods' blessing is suicide. Not because the gods will intervene, but because your own soldiers will desert the moment things go wrong. Men need to believe they're fighting fate, not against it. So the Spartans send a delegation to Delphi with gold stripped from their own temples, payment for the most expensive consultation in the ancient world. Delphi isn't a church, it's a corporation. The priests who manage the sanctuary are, functionally, the world's first defense contractors. They sell war licenses to the highest bidder, offering divine approval to anyone who can afford the fee. The consultation room sits above a fissure in the rock where volcanic gases seep up from deep underground. The gases contain ethylene, a sweet-smelling compound that causes euphoria, dissociation, and violent seizures when inhaled in concentrated doses. The Pythia is a woman. She's always a woman, chosen young, kept isolated, trained to breathe the fumes until her mind cracks open. When the Spartan delegation arrives, they find her seated on a bronze tripod over the fissure, her body convulsing, her eyes rolled back until only the whites show, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. She's not channeling Apollo. She's being poisoned. The priests stand nearby with bronze tablets and sharp styluses, ready to translate her babbling into prophecy. The Spartans ask their question, "Can we take Messenia?" The Pythia thrashes. She screams words that aren't words, guttural sounds, animal noises, the vocabulary of a brain drowning in toxic gas. The priests listen carefully. Then one of them steps forward and delivers Apollo's answer, "Dance for the god, and the rich land shall be yours." The Spartans interpret this as permission. They leave satisfied, their gold spent, their conscience clear. What they don't know is that a Messenian delegation arrived the day before with their own gold and their own questions. The Messenians received a different prophecy. When the goat drinks from the Neda, Messenia falls. The Messenians interpret this as protection. Clearly, the prophecy describes an impossible event, a guarantee of safety. Both sides believe they have divine backing. Both sides are being played. The priests of Delphi will profit regardless of who wins. If Sparta conquers Messenia, the Spartans will return with tribute and thanksgiving. If Messenia survives, the Messenians will credit the oracle's protection and shower the sanctuary with gifts. The prophecy business is built on deliberately vague language and the human need to believe that suffering has meaning. The Pythia, meanwhile, is carried to her quarters by temple slaves. She'll spend 3 days recovering from the seizure, drinking honeyed wine to soothe her ravaged throat, waiting for the next consultation, the next dose of volcanic poison, the next performance of her slow destruction. She doesn't know what she said. She never does. The gods speak through her, and she remembers nothing but the taste of copper and the feeling of drowning in air. The war has its license. The machine can begin. A single hoplite panoply weighs 30 kilograms. The shield alone, the hoplon that gives the soldier his name, accounts for 8 kilograms of hammered bronze stretched over a wooden core. Add the helmet, the breastplate, the greaves, the spear with its bronze leaf blade, the short sword with its iron edge, and you have an investment that represents more wealth than most Spartan families will see in a lifetime. Bronze requires copper and tin. Copper comes from Cyprus, shipped across 400 miles of open water in vessels that sink with depressing regularity. Tin is rarer. It comes from the edges of the known world, from Britain where the seas freeze in winter, from Afghanistan where the mountains touch the sky. The supply chain for a single Spartan warrior stretches 4,000 miles. Every shield represents a chain of merchants, miners, sailors, and smiths spanning 3 continents. In a forge outside Sparta, a smith named Demophilus works for 3 days without sleep. The bronze must reach exactly 950 degrees, too cool and it won't flow, too hot and it becomes brittle. He judges the temperature by color. Orange is wrong, yellow is wrong. Only the particular shade of white gold means the metal is ready. The forge stinks of charcoal, copper, and his own sweat. His lungs burn from the smoke. His hands are scarred from old burns, the skin waxy and numb where the nerves have died. He's making a shield for a man he'll never meet, a warrior who will carry this bronze into battle and either return victorious or leave it in Messenian soil. If the shield cracks, if Demophilus misjudged the temperature, if he hammered too hard, if there's a hidden flaw in the metal, that man will die. The Persians and their descendants will mock Greek shields as primitive, but they don't understand. This bronze is the product of a civilization's entire logistical capacity compressed into a circle 3 feet across. To field 5,000 hoplites, Sparta needs 150 tons of bronze. The treasury doesn't have it. The ephors order the melting of religious offerings, ancestral dedications, sacred tripods, objects that represent generations of family piety. Priests weep as the bronze goes into the furnace. The ephors don't care. Metal is metal. Each shield costs enough to feed a family for 2 years. Investment. If they're wrong, the forges will go cold, the army will dissolve, and the children they sacrificed for bronze will have died for nothing. Demophilus finishes the shield at dawn. He polishes it until he can see his reflection. A gaunt face, hollow cheeks, the eyes of a man who hasn't eaten properly in months. Then he adds it to the stack and begins the next one. The machine demands more. 8,000 men require 35,000 calories per mile. The Spartan army moves at 15 miles per day across terrain that offers nothing. No supply depots, no friendly villages, no pre-positioned caches of grain. They carry 3 days of rations. Dried figs, barley cakes hard enough to crack teeth, strips of salted pork that taste like leather soaked in brine. After 3 days, the rations are gone. After 3 days, the army must feed itself. This is the part the war songs never mention. Conquest isn't about battles, it's about calories. A soldier who doesn't eat cannot march. A soldier who cannot march cannot fight. The entire military apparatus of the ancient world runs on a simple equation: food in, violence out. The Spartans understand this equation better than anyone. They've been hungry their entire lives. The first Messenian village appears on the 4th day. It's a small settlement, perhaps 30 houses clustered around a well surrounded by barley fields ready for harvest. The women and children remain, standing in the village square with a desperate hope that surrender will bring mercy. It doesn't. The Spartans move through the village with the efficiency of locusts. The granaries are emptied first, every sack of barley, every jar of oil, every amphora of wine loaded onto requisition carts. The livestock goes next: sheep, goats, pigs, the single ox that pulled the village plow. The animals are slaughtered on the spot, butchered by men who learned the trade cutting up their own meager herds. Blood pools in the dust. The smell of opened bowels mixes with the smoke from cooking fires. Then comes the human inventory. A Spartan officer walks among the villagers, examining them the way a farmer examines livestock at market. The women of breeding age, 15 to 30, healthy, with wide hips and strong teeth, are separated and bound. They'll be distributed among the soldiers as prizes, their bodies serving the same logistical function as the grain, fuel for the machine. The children are evaluated next. Those old enough to carry loads are kept. Those too young to work are left standing in the empty square, watching their mothers dragged away, too confused to cry. No one kills the useless children. That would require effort. The Spartans simply leave them with nothing. No food, no shelter, no adults to protect them. The wilderness will do the rest. Wolves, exposure, starvation. The result is the same as murder, but no Spartan hand delivers the blow. The gods cannot hold them accountable for what nature does. This scene repeats across Messenia, village after village stripped clean, the population processed like raw material, the land picked down to bare soil. This isn't conquest, it's asset acquisition. Human beings reduced to line items on an inventory, so many bushels of grain, so many head of livestock, so many wombs capable of producing the next generation of slaves. The machine feeds, the machine advances. The Messenian king Euphaes has a problem he doesn't recognize. His people believe they're invincible. The oracle at Delphi promised them protection. When the goat drinks from the Netta, Messenia falls. The Netta is a river. Goats don't drink from rivers. They drink from streams, from puddles, from troughs. The prophecy describes an impossibility. The gods have guaranteed Messenian survival. This confidence is poison. The Messenians refuse to fortify their borders. They reject an alliance with Argos, their natural ally against Spartan expansion. They watch the Spartans cross into their territory and assume the invasion will collapse on its own, broken against the wall of divine favor. They trust the gods the way a child trusts a father who has already decided to abandon him. A Messenian priest named Ophionius sees what his countrymen cannot. He spent his life studying the sacred texts, parsing the grammar of prophecy, understanding how the gods speak in riddles designed to be misunderstood. He knows that goat in Greek is trogos. He knows there's a village on the Nita River called Trogos, named, according to local legend, for a goat that once led lost travelers to water. The prophecy isn't impossible, it's a pun. Ophionius rides to the Spartan camp under cover of darkness. He finds the Spartan kings and explains the linguistic trick, the price of his betrayal, his life, his family's safety, a farm in the conquered territory. The Spartans accept. Traitors are useful. The next morning, a Spartan squad marches to Trogos. The village is small, 50 souls who have done nothing to deserve what comes next. The Spartans kill everyone. Not quickly, not cleanly, but thoroughly. They want witnesses to escape and spread the story. When the killing is done, the soldiers walk to the riverbank in ceremonial formation. They kneel, they cup their hands, they drink from the Netta. Then they send a messenger to the Messenian army with a simple statement: "The goat is drunk. Your god has abandoned you." The effect is immediate and catastrophic. Soldiers who are prepared to die for their homeland throw down their weapons and walk toward the Spartan lines, surrendering to what they believe is divine inevitability. Officers who rallied their men with promises of sacred protection now stand mute, unable to explain why the gods have betrayed them. The Messenian army doesn't collapse from military defeat. It collapses from theological despair. King Euphaes watches his forces dissolve and understands, too late, the truth about prophecy. The gods don't protect anyone. They simply provide language flexible enough to justify whatever happens next. The winners claim divine favor. The losers claim divine mystery. The priests collect payment from both sides. Messenia's faith dies on the banks of the Netta. The war continues without it. Mount Ithome rises 800 meters above the Stenoclarian plain, a natural fortress of sheer cliffs and narrow defiles. 50 defenders with spears can hold this path against 50,000 attackers. The Messenians retreat here after the disaster at the Neta, dragging their families, their remaining livestock, and whatever grain they could salvage from the burning lowlands. They believe the mountain will save them. The Spartans arrive 3 days later. They look up at the cliffs, at the tiny figures of Messenian sentries silhouetted against the sky, at the impossible geometry of assault. Their generals confer. Their solution is predictable. They have no idea what to do. Sparta trains men to fight in phalanx formation on open ground. They know nothing about siege warfare. No engineers, no siege towers, no battering rams, no understanding of the mathematics required to breach a fortified position. Their military doctrine has exactly one answer for every problem. Stand in a line, push forward, kill whatever's in front of you. Mountains don't respond to pushing, so they do the only thing they can. They surround the mountain and wait. Year 1 passes. The Messenians ration their grain, calculating how long they can hold. The Spartans build permanent camps, rotating units home for planting season, treating the siege like a second job. Year 2, Year 5, Year 10. The siege becomes its own society, a permanent state of suspended violence where nothing happens except slow death. Inside the mountain, the Messenians eat their horses first, then their dogs, then their leather sandals, boiled for hours until they become gelatinous slime that provides calories but no nutrition. Children are born on Ethome who have never seen flat ground, never tasted fresh bread, never known a world without hunger. Some of these children grow to adolescence. Most don't. Their bones join the growing cemetery on the mountain's eastern slope. Outside, the Spartans fare little better. Dysentery ravages the camps every summer, killing more men than Messenian arrows ever could. The latrines overflow. The water sources become contaminated. Soldiers defecate blood and die within days, their bodies burned in pits that never stop smoking. The smell carries for miles, roasting flesh, human waste, the particular sweetness of gangrene. 19 years. The siege lasts 19 years. A Spartan who began the investment as a young man of 20 ends at approaching 40, his youth spent staring at a mountain that refuses to fall. A Messenian child born in the first year of the siege dies in the 15th, never having known anything except hunger, fear, and the distant campfires of the enemy. Both sides are killing themselves to prove a point. The mountain doesn't care. The gods don't intervene. The dead accumulate on both sides of the line, sacrificed to nothing but stubborn pride. The stalemate needs breaking. Someone must blink. Year 12. The Messenian king Aristodemus sends envoys to Delphi, desperate for divine guidance. The siege is killing his people by inches. Children are dying. Warriors are losing the strength to hold their spears. He needs the gods to intervene, or at least to tell him how to make them intervene. The gods are demanding he kill his own daughter. Her name is lost to history. She's 14 years old. She has her mother's eyes, dark brown, almost black, with flecks of gold near the iris. She's been told she's beautiful, though beauty means nothing on a starving mountain. She's been told she might marry a prince someday, unite the Messenian factions, bear sons who will reclaim the lowlands. None of that matters now. Aristodemus stares at his daughter for 3 days. He doesn't eat. He doesn't speak. He sits in his tent and watches her move through the camp, helping distribute the meager rations, comforting the younger children, performing the small kindnesses that make her beloved among the refugees. On the 4th day, he makes his decision. The Temple of Zeus on Ithome is a crude structure, stone walls, a bronze altar, a wooden roof that leaks when it rains. The priests prepare the space with trembling hands. They've sacrificed goats, sheep, bulls. Never this. The girl walks to the altar without resistance. Perhaps she believes her death will mean something. Perhaps she's simply too weak to fight. Aristodemus takes the bronze knife. His daughter looks up at him. She doesn't speak. She doesn't beg. She has her mother's eyes. The blade opens her throat. Blood sprays across the altar, across the king's robes, pooling around his sandals in a spreading lake of crimson. The priests chant prayers of thanksgiving while the girl's body convulses, her heels drumming against the stone. It takes longer than Aristodemus expected. Much longer. Then the accusation comes. A nobleman named Lyciscus pushes through the crowd, shouting that the princess was not a virgin, that she had been pregnant with his child, that the sacrifice is void, that the gods will reject this used offering. He produces no evidence. He doesn't need to. Doubt spreads faster than truth. Did the sacrifice count? The army splinters into factions, those who believe, those who doubt, those who simply want someone to blame for 18 years of suffering. Aristodemus returns to his tent, removes his blood-soaked robe, and hangs himself from the center pole. They find him the next morning, his face purple, his daughter's blood still crusted on his hands. In 1 week, Messenia loses its king, its princess, and its faith. The Spartan soldier Theopompus was 15 years old when the siege began. He'd barely completed his Agoge training, still lean, still soft in places, still flinching at the sound of screaming. Now he's 34. His beard is streaked with gray. His knees ache when the weather changes. He has spent his entire adult life staring at a mountain. Theopompus has a son now. The boy is 14, the same age Theopompus was when he first marched to Ithome. The boy has never seen Sparta. His teachers were veterans who had forgotten how to do anything except kill and wait. This is what 20 years of siege produces, a generation that knows nothing but war. The boys born in the camps don't understand peacetime agriculture, peacetime crafts, peacetime religion. They understand patrol rotations, supply logistics, and the particular sound a man makes when a spear punctures his lung. They've been marinated in violence since birth, shaped by it the way water shapes stone. Theopompus teaches his son the lessons he's learned: how to sleep in armor without developing sores, how to shit in a trench without exposing yourself to enemy archers, how to suppress the urge to vomit when walking through a field of week-old corpses, how to kill a man quietly, hand over mouth, blade across throat, knee in the back to control the thrashing. These are practical skills. These are survival skills. These are the skills that will keep the boy alive when his turn comes to hold the line. The Spartan elders watch this accidental education and recognize something valuable. The siege has created a training system more effective than anything they designed deliberately. Boys raised in combat conditions become men who treat combat as natural. The fear response diminishes. The hesitation disappears. What remains is something closer to machinery than humanity. Soldiers who advance when ordered, kill when ordered, die when ordered, without the inconvenient interference of individual thought. After the war ends, the Spartans will formalize this system. They'll call it the Agoge, and they'll pretend it emerged from ancient wisdom and divine inspiration. But the truth is simpler and uglier. It's institutionalized trauma dressed up as tradition. Theopompus doesn't live to see the formalization. He dies in year 18 of the siege, killed by a Messenian arrow during a routine patrol. His son buries him in the rocky soil outside the camp, marks the grave with a flat stone, and returns to duty the same afternoon. There's no funeral. There's no mourning period. Starvation has reduced the defenders to skeletal remnants, too weak to hold spears, too exhausted to stand. Watch. The children stopped dying months ago. There are no children left young enough to die. The survivors are the toughest, the luckiest, the ones willing to eat things that others wouldn't touch. They've won the lottery of suffering, and their prize is the chance to negotiate surrender. The Messenian envoys descend the mountain on legs that barely function. They haven't walked on flat ground in years. The muscles have atrophied. The joints have stiffened. They stumble like newborn calves, these men who were once warriors, and the Spartans watch them approach with expressions that mix contempt and satisfaction. The Spartan terms are unprecedented. They don't want tribute, regular payments that acknowledge Messenian sovereignty. They don't want hostages, noble children held as guarantees of good behavior. They want something that has never been attempted at this scale, the complete legal transformation of an entire people into property. The Messenians will become helots. The word is new. The concept is ancient, slavery, but the implementation is revolutionary. Helots are not slaves who can be bought and sold. They are slaves bound permanently to the land they once owned, required to farm it for Spartan masters, forbidden to leave, forbidden to marry without permission, forbidden to own weapons, forbidden to gather in groups larger than 3. Every Messenian family must surrender 50% of their harvest to their assigned Spartan overlord. This isn't taxation. Taxes imply citizenship, participation, rights. This is extraction, pure and simple. The Messenians will grow food they cannot eat, raise livestock they cannot slaughter, tend orchards whose fruit belongs to someone else. They must wear dogskin caps to mark their status. They must step off the road when a Spartan approaches. They must present themselves annually for inspection, during which any helot judged too proud or too healthy can be executed without trial. Pride is dangerous in slaves. Health suggests they're not working hard enough. The Messenian envoys listen to these terms. One of them, an old man named Cleonius, who remembers the world before the siege, begins to laugh. The laughter builds until his entire body shakes, until tears stream down his hollow cheeks, until the sound becomes indistinguishable from sobbing. Then he draws a knife from his robe and opens his own throat. His blood splashes across the lead Spartan negotiator's face. The Spartan doesn't flinch. He wipes the blood away with the back of his hand and repeats the terms to the remaining envoy. The envoy accepts. What choice does he have? The alternative is extermination. At least as helots, the Messenians will exist. At least their children will breathe. At least there's a chance, however small, that someday the balance will shift. The century of chains has officially begun. The Messenians descend from Mount Ithome in the spring, walking on legs that have forgotten flat ground, blinking at a world that has changed beyond recognition. The fields they once owned are overgrown with 20 years of neglect, chest-high weeds, collapsed irrigation channels, orchards gone wild with unpruned growth. But beneath the chaos, the soil has been resting. 20 years without planting has restored nutrients that generations of farming had depleted. The land is more fertile now than it has been in living memory. The Spartans understand this. They've calculated the yield potential. They've assigned each helot family to their ancestral plots, not out of sentiment but efficiency. People work harder on land they remember loving. The overseers arrive before the first seeds go into the ground, hard-faced men carrying whips braided from bull sinew, positioned at the edges of every field to ensure the helots work from dawn until their shadows disappear. A Messenian woman named Gorgo plants barley in soil her grandfather cleared. Her husband died during the siege, starvation, not violence, though the distinction hardly matters. Her sons work beside her, boys of 12 and 14 who have never known anything except war and its aftermath. They don't remember their father's face. They don't remember freedom. They remember only hunger and the sound of their mother's voice telling them to keep moving, keep working, keep breathing. The harvest comes in autumn, and it's extraordinary. Bursting with sweetness, the Helots work through the harvest with something almost like hope. Perhaps the Spartans will be satisfied. Perhaps abundance will buy mercy. The wagons arrive on the third day of threshing. Spartan officials with bronze tablets and sharp styluses count every bushel, every amphora, every basket of fruit. They take exactly half the mandated tribute, loaded efficiently, recorded precisely. Then the overseer steps forward. He examines what remains. He selects another portion, arbitrary, unexplained, unchallengeable. Some families lose a tenth more, some lose a quarter. Some lose everything except the seed grain for next year's planting. Gorgo watches them load the wheat her family planted, tended, and harvested. She doesn't weep. Tears are wasted moisture. Instead, she memorizes faces. The overseer with the crooked nose, the wagon driver who spits before speaking, the official who marks his tablet with unnecessary flourishes. She burns these faces into her memory the way her ancestors burned patterns into bronze. That night she gathers her sons. She speaks quietly, conscious of neighbors who might inform, overseers who might listen. She tells them, count everything, remember everything, every grain they take, every insult they deliver, every face, every name, every wrong. One day the bill comes due. Her sons nod. They don't understand yet. They will. The system isn't designed for efficiency. It's designed for humiliation. A generation passes in chains. The children born into helotry grow to adulthood knowing nothing else. They speak Greek with Messenian accents, softer vowels, lilting cadences that mark them as property the moment they open their mouths. They think in terms of survival, which overseers can be appeased, which must be avoided, how much grain can be hidden without triggering suspicion. They don't think about rebellion. Rebellion is a concept for free people. Slaves think about tomorrow. The Spartans watch their helots and see what they want to see. A broken population, properly domesticated, resigned to permanent subjugation. They grow complacent. They reduce the number of overseers. Guards are expensive and the helots seem docile. They permit small gatherings for religious festivals, controlled pressure releases that prevent explosive buildup. They allow limited trade between helot villages, economic activity that increases productivity and creates informants grateful for small privileges. These concessions aren't mercy, they're cost optimization. The Spartans have discovered that terrorized slaves work poorly. A certain amount of slack in the chain produces better yields than constant brutality. The helots interpret this slack as opportunity. In a cave on Mount Ithome, the same mountain where their grandparents starved, a small group meets by moonlight. They number fewer than 20, selected through years of careful observation, each one tested for loyalty through incremental acts of minor resistance. They are led by a man named Aristomenes. Aristomenes is 30 years old. His mother was a helot who worked the olive groves near Sthenoclaris. His father, according to whispered legend, was a Messenian nobleman who survived the siege by hiding among the slaves, dying when Aristomenes was 6. The story might be true. It might be propaganda, a heroic lineage constructed to inspire followers. It doesn't matter. What matters is what Aristomenes has become. He's been planning since he was 12, 18 years of patient preparation. He has memorized the patrol schedules of every Spartan garrison in Messenia. He knows which officers drink too much, which ones visit helot women after dark, which ones can be bribed with information about their rivals. He knows the location of every hidden weapon cache, bronze blades buried in olive groves, spearheads concealed beneath hearthstones, swords wrapped in oilcloth and sunk in wells. Aristomenes carries a dagger that belonged to his grandfather, one of the last Messenian warriors of the First War. The bronze blade is chipped and worn, its edge dulled by decades of concealment. It has killed exactly 0 Spartans. He draws the blade in the cave's darkness, letting his followers see it glint in the moonlight. He makes them a promise. Before I die, this blade will taste Spartan blood. Before you die, Messenia will taste freedom. The 30-year silence is about to end. The signal is the dog star Sirius rising above the eastern mountains. When its cold light clears the peaks, the killing begins. Aristomenes has spent 3 years coordinating this moment. Messengers disguised as traveling merchants have carried instructions to 40 villages. Weapons hidden for a generation have been unearthed, cleaned, sharpened. Every helot in the conspiracy knows their target, the Spartan overseer assigned to their district. Every helot knows the timing, midnight when the overseers sleep deepest, when the wine they've drunk with dinner holds them in unconscious vulnerability. The Spartans have forbidden helots from owning weapons, so the rebels improvise, sickles designed for harvesting grain, hoes meant for breaking soil, butchering knives used on livestock for 30 years, their edges honed to razor sharpness, rocks selected for weight and balance, smooth enough to grip, heavy enough to shatter bone. In a farmhouse near Sthenoclaris, a helot named Polydorus stands over his sleeping master. The Spartan is named Eurybiades, a man Polydorus has served for 15 years, fetching his wine, cleaning his boots, enduring his casual cruelties with the blank face required for survival. Eurybiades once called Polydorus almost a friend. He meant it as a compliment. Polydorus holds a reaping hook. The curved blade is designed for cutting wheat stalks close to the ground. It works equally well on throats. Eurybiades wakes at the last moment. He sees Polydorus above him, sees the blade descending, manages a single word, "Why?" Polydorus doesn't answer. The hook enters below the collarbone and exits through the back. The Spartan's blood sprays across the whitewashed wall. By dawn, 300 Spartans are dead across Messenia. It's the bloodiest night in Spartan history. The Second Messenian War has begun with a whisper of bronze through sleeping flesh. The Spartans respond with predictable fury. They mobilize their full army, 5,000 hoplites, the iron core of their military, and march into Messenia expecting the same siege warfare that won the first war. They find something different. Aristomenes doesn't wait on a mountain. He doesn't build fortifications or defend fixed positions. Aristomenes learns that a Spartan column is moving through a narrow valley named for an ancient legend. He positions 500 rebels on the ridgelines with rocks, javelins, and hunting bows, weapons scrounged, stolen, improvised. The Spartans enter the valley in standard formation, 800 men in a bronze snake. They don't see the ambush until the first boulders come thundering down. The rocks don't just kill, they block the path. The column compresses. Men at the front cannot advance. Men at the rear cannot retreat. The helots pour olive oil on rocks and set them alight. They roll burning hay bales down the slopes. The Spartans below cook inside their armor. Bronze heated to blistering temperatures, skin fusing with metal, men screaming as they tear at breastplates that have become instruments of torture. 200 Spartans die. Aristomenes loses 40. The numbers make no sense. Helots aren't supposed to beat Spartans, but the rules have changed. This isn't a war of formations and set-piece battles. This is extermination by 1,000 cuts. Aristomenes' most audacious act requires no army. He infiltrates Sparta itself, the enemy capital, the heart of the machine that has enslaved his people for generations. He travels alone, moving at night, wearing the rough clothes of a traveling laborer. The Spartans don't guard their borders carefully. Why would they? No one attacks Sparta. No one enters uninvited. The arrogance of invincibility is its own weakness. He reaches the city before dawn. Sparta has no walls. The Spartans boast that their men are walls enough. Aristomenes walks through empty streets, past the barracks where soldiers sleep, past the mess halls where they eat their black broth, past the palace where the twin kings dream of conquest. His target is the temple of Athena Chalkioikos, Athena of the Bronze House, the holiest site in Laconia. He doesn't burn it, he doesn't steal its treasures, he does something worse. He hangs his personal shield on the temple door. The shield bears an inscription, Aristomenes from the spoils of Sparta. A priest discovers it at dawn. For a moment he doesn't understand. Then the implication strikes. A helot walked into Sparta, past every guard, through the sacred city, and left a message. The priest's scream echoes through the empty streets. By noon, the city is in panic. If Aristomenes can enter Sparta once, he can enter again. If he can hang a shield, he can plant a knife. No Spartan sleeps soundly that night, or for many nights after. The shield proves what the Messenians need to believe. The masters are not gods. They can be reached. They can be humiliated. They can be killed. Every war has turning points. Aristomenes comes through betrayal. A Messenian named Aristocrates, a man trusted with supply routes and safe-house locations, sells the information to Sparta. The price, his life, his family's safety, a promise of land in the conquered territory. Traitors always have reasons. The reasons never matter to the betrayed. The Spartans capture Aristomenes during a night raid. They don't execute him publicly. Martyrs inspire more rebellion than living leaders. Instead, they take him to the Kyatas. The Kyatas is a chasm in the Taygetus Mountains, 200 feet deep, littered with the bones of criminals, traitors, and infants deemed too weak to become warriors. It's not an execution site, it's an erasure. No grave, no marker, no memory. Those thrown in die slowly from injuries, starvation, or exposure. The rats finish what the fall begins. They throw Aristomenes in at midnight. He falls through darkness, hits the bone pile at the bottom, feels his legs snap on impact. Pain whites out his vision. When he can see again, he's surrounded by corpses in various stages of decay. Some are fresh, some are skeletal. The smell is indescribable. He lies there for 3 days, certain he's going to die. Then he notices movement, a fox picking through the bones. A fox means another exit, a passage too small for humans but navigable for desperate men. Aristomenes follows the fox, crawling on his shattered leg, squeezing through rock fissures that tear his skin. He emerges on the mountainside at dawn, bloody, broken, and alive. The Spartans wanted to make him an example of their power. Instead, he becomes proof that their cruelty can be survived. The Spartans, unable to defeat Aristomenes through force, try something unprecedented. They import help. They send to Athens requesting military assistance. Athens, amused by the request, sends them Tyrtaeus, a lame poet who can barely walk. It's meant as an insult. The Spartans asked for warriors. Athens sent a cripple. But Tyrtaeus understands something the Spartan kings don't. Armies run on belief. A soldier who thinks he's going to die fights poorly. A soldier who thinks his death will be beautiful fights like a god. Tyrtaeus composes war poetry. The verses are simple, rhythmic, designed to be chanted while marching. They transform suffering into glory. The beautiful death is the man who falls in the front line fighting for his fatherland. They make cowardice shameful. A man who flees brings disgrace on his entire family. They create cadences that synchronize the phalanx advance, left foot, right foot, spear thrust, step forward. The first time Tyrtaeus recites before the Spartan army, the soldiers are skeptical. This crippled stranger presumes to teach them about war, but then he speaks. His voice carries across the assembled ranks, and his words describe their pain as something meaningful. The soldiers listen. They memorize. They begin to chant. Tyrtaeus doesn't win battles. He makes men willing to die in them. His poems will be recited for 5 centuries, long after everyone forgets he was a foreigner sent as a joke. Words become weapons. The lame poet reshapes Sparta more than any general ever could. The Second Messenian War ends not with a decisive battle, but with exhaustion. 17 years of guerrilla warfare have depleted both sides. Aristomenes is aging. His broken leg never healed properly, and he walks with a permanent limp. His lieutenants are dead, captured, or turned. The generation that remembered freedom is dying. Those born during the war know only running and hiding. The Spartans agree immediately. They've learned that killing rebel leaders only creates martyrs. Exile is more effective. Remove the symbol, let the movement wither. Aristomenes learns of the plot from a soldier still loyal. He faces an impossible choice: fight his own people or abandon them. He chooses survival, not for himself, but for the idea he represents. With approximately 300 followers, men, women, children who would rather flee than submit, he escapes west to Arcadia, then eventually to Sicily. They found a colony there, a small settlement of exiles who keep Messenian traditions alive in foreign soil. Aristomenes never sees his homeland again. He spends his remaining decades planning a return that circumstances never permit. His final words, according to legend, are a promise: I will come back. He doesn't specify when. He doesn't have to. The rebellion dies. The hope doesn't. After the Second War, the Spartans redesigned their control system. The previous methods, simple brutality, economic extraction, casual humiliation, proved insufficient. The Helots rebelled anyway. Something more comprehensive is required. They create the Cryptia. Each year, young Spartans approaching adulthood are sent into the countryside with daggers and orders. Kill any Helot who appears too strong, too confident, too popular. The boys operate at night, targeting natural leaders, potential organizers, anyone who might spark another Aristomenes. It's presented as a training exercise. The youths learn stealth, tracking, and killing while simultaneously culling dangerous elements. The Ephors formalize terror through law. Each year they declare war on the Helots. a legal fiction that permits any Spartan to kill any helot at any time without consequence. Murder becomes military action. Atrocity becomes policy. The humiliation rituals intensify. Helots must wear dogskin caps marking their subhuman status. Each year they're beaten publicly, not for crimes, simply as reminder. They're forced to drink unmixed wine until they vomit, then made to sing degrading songs for Spartan entertainment. The message is constant: you are not people, you are property. Property does not rebel. The system works. For 3 centuries, there are no major uprisings. The helots labor, suffer, and die in service to masters who treat them as livestock. Generation after generation grows up believing this is natural, inevitable, permanent. But they remember. Mothers whisper stories to children. The memories pass down like genetic code, waiting for the moment when circumstance and courage align. The bill comes due in 369 BC, 3 centuries after the First War ended. The Theban general Epaminondas crushes Sparta at Leuctra, shattering the myth of Spartan invincibility. He doesn't stop at military victory. He marches into Messenia with a specific mission: liberation. The helots who emerge to greet him are the descendants of slaves, who were descendants of slaves, who were descendants of the free Messenians conquered in 724 BC. They carry memories preserved through 10 generations of bondage, names, places, stories, grievances cataloged and transmitted with religious precision. Epaminondas founds the city of Messene on the slopes of Mount Ithome, the same mountain where their ancestors starved, the same mountain where Aristomenes hid, the same mountain that became a symbol of both defeat and defiance. The walls are built by free hands for the first time in 300 years. An old woman stands in the agra of the new city. She's in her 80s, born a helot, as was her mother and her grandmother and every woman in her line for 10 generations. She has never spoken freely in public. She has never walked without watching for overseers. She has never known what it means to belong to herself. She looks up at the walls built by Messenians, for Messenians, defended by Messenian soldiers who answer to no Spartan master. Around her, former helots weep openly, embrace strangers, speak their true names aloud for the first time. The woman raises her voice. It cracks with age and emotion, but it carries across the square. We came back. Aristomenes had promised. It took 300 years, but the bill came due. The chains are broken. The ghosts of Ithome can finally rest.